Well, hey everyone, I am Gentry, your host of the Vibrant Life Show, and welcome back. This show is all about exploring the purposes God has placed in our lives and the passions He's placed in our hearts to reach the community He has placed us in for such a time as this. So whether we're hearing stories of those living out their passions, helping you discover your purpose, asking hard questions, or leaning into cultural moments, the hope of this show is to remind us that the life that God's created us to live is an adventurous one, a meaningful one, a purposeful one. We are invited to live the vibrant life. And today on the show, we have part 2 of the Unwanted Fraternity, talking about healing after loss, the authentic journey of finding healing after loss. And with that, I have Greg Tonkinson in the studio still with me. Welcome to part 2.
Again.
Yes, thank you. This conversation that we're talking about, so many people are affected by loss of a loved one. And honestly, we look around the world right now, as you were saying in the last podcast, news stories, tragedies. There's so much loss surrounding us, and we are a part of this unwanted fraternity. So you are now an author, which comes out in July, but you can get the ebook now. You are a spiritual life director at Valley Christian. Go Trojans.
Yes.
I could just sing the whole song. and so I'm just so excited to be able to talk about this. And you also have a show on Faith Talk coming out about this too.
Crazy how all this is happening. And yeah, we're just so excited, Allie, because we know that people are hungry for this, because tragedy, loss, whether it's receiving news of cancer or loss of a loved one, or even things like abandonment or divorce, or any time that you wake up and you think, God, I'm not in control, and I'm getting hit pretty hard with that reality. Because like we said in the last podcast, every situation is going to be unique. But there's some common ground that all the members of the fraternity have experienced or will experience. And so this book was written, and the podcast is going through the values of the Unwanted Fraternity. And we're just finding that there is a group of people out there that are hungry for that, not because we have all the answers, but collectively we can walk through this together. Right.
And this story came out of the loss of your wife, Leanne. Yeah. Is it March 6th?
March 6th, 2010.
2010.
Yep.
And the story of that with your children walking through that, and now how God and His grace through that story has also brought someone in your life, Jennifer, as well, and merging families and how that all played out is really powerful, and it's in your book, and we're going to link to that in the show notes, as well as the last show as well, because it's so powerful. But sometimes it doesn't always. What I love about it in the book, you're saying, just because you acknowledge that God's good doesn't mean that He's going to bring certain things into your life after loss.
Yeah. And in the intro, I believe I say, hey, listen, the last chapter is called Wonderfully Messy. And that's the story of Jennifer and I getting together. Now we're in a blended family. We have 5 kids. And yet I wanted people to know, when you start out on this journey, if you read this book, it doesn't always happen like that. And I want everyone to know, just because I got remarried, just because God allowed me to meet someone else, doesn't mean like we've put a bow on this and life is good.
Right.
Every time you experience tragedy, and you and I were talking off air that, we've got friends that it's not one tragedy. It's multiple tragedies. It's multiple events. And most of the people in the Unwanted Fraternity, these are events that I wasn't expecting. Even if it's something long-term, like terminal cancer, or maybe the process of someone abandoning you or hurting you in some way, the moment where it becomes final, you start this journey of loss, of emptiness, of being alone. And so I want everyone to know that when you start that, there's no easy answer to, here are the 7 steps to fix it.
Right.
On the other hand, there are moments where you and I can speak into each other's lives to say, hey, I've been through it. I'm a little further down the road than you. And here's some pitfalls to avoid. Here's some things that we don't want to do. because it will just amplify the pain and suffering. And so I think everyone in the fraternity is looking for true healing. I really do think we're all about the business of, I know now the depths of pain. I know now the depth of loss and suffering. God, I don't want to stay here. I want to recover. And so can you give me some help in that? And so that's what this is about.
Right. And that, what we talked about last time, just a kind of a higher view of everything that kind of happened, more, 10,000 foot perspective of the journey and the situation. But on this episode, I really want to dive into the hard questions that people ask when they're going through tough, traumatic times, whether that's through abandonment, divorce, or loss of a loved one, that in any way, shape, or form, that we're asking these questions. And one of the things that you said that I really resonated with, is that brokenness takes place mainly on the inside and is unplanned. And I want to ask a little bit where that came from, specifically how you experienced it. But first, I think it's acknowledging that when people are going through these moments, like, it's almost as we don't need to put a Band-Aid on this. Like I think we need to sit in the brokenness and understand what's going on, instead of trying to move past it. Cause I think that delays healing, and you can correct me. I would love your input on that. But you said brokenness takes place mainly on the inside and is unplanned.
Yeah. And in fact, in back-to-back chapters, one chapter is called Beautiful Community, and the very next chapter is called Acutely Alone. And it just seems so paradoxical that, well, if I have community, how can I be alone? But that's the journey of unwanted fraternity members. We have all these people around us one moment, and yet even in that same space, we look around and in the depths of our soul, we feel so completely alone. And I experienced that early on, that again, with 3 kids and a host of family members in town, you would think, oh, he's taken care of. Externally, that may have been the case, that if you looked at our lives, I still went to work, the kids still went to school, we still went to church, but inside, this internal chaos, and I didn't coin that phrase, a friend of mine, Jerry Sitzer, he's the one who told me about that. He said, Greg, I was 3 weeks into my journey. Jerry, in a car accident up north, had lost his wife, mother, daughter in a head-on collision, and he was driving, and a drunk driver came into his lane, and his life is now forever changed. And so he was several years down in his journey, further in his journey, and he told me early in my journey, you're going to experience internal chaos. And I thought, Jerry, what is that? And he said, it's going to be where everything on the outside looks great, or at least acceptable, but on the inside, it's a tornado that's just ripping through your soul day after day. And here's the challenge, I think, Allie, is that as a Christian, as a Christ follower, as a person of faith, we're always taught, man, your relationship with God is not going to be perfect, but it needs to be this great, neat, where you have the answers, you're reading the Bible, and God's giving you the answers. And I woke up day after day thinking, God, I still love you. I know you still love me, but I am in such pain. I'm suffering so badly. It feels like I'm drowning. It feels like I'm suffocating. And this is why I can resonate with people who can't get out of bed, people who can't function healthily because they've walked into this pain and this suffering, and it's overwhelming them. And so I wrestle in the book with issues like being angry, and can I be angry as a Christian? Do I have the freedom to lash out? Can I doubt even God? Can I go to God and say, God, why did this happen? Not just like I'm curious, but I don't agree with it.
Right.
Can I go to God and say, God, you didn't do it right here? And I was feeling all of these things. I would journal all these things, and there was a bit of guilt, there was a bit of shame, there was a bit of wondering, am I going to be viewed as someone who has left the faith? Am I a Christian still? And I've met so many fraternity members that when I mention that, or they've read the ebook version, they say to me, I get that. Thank you for saying that, because now we can have a space to talk about it.
Right, which is so critical. And I think something that's been missing in the church specifically, I think we're getting a little bit better at it.
Yeah.
I'm believing that.
Right.
And I think that's going to be healthier for the church in general, be more vibrant.
Right.
But what you're saying is opening this up, because when people don't say that they're doubting, don't say that they're angry, don't say like, God, why?
Yeah.
And they feel like they can't say it. I mean, you're a pastor.
Right.
Doctorate in theology.
Right.
I mean, you is spiritual life director.
Right. Yeah.
And you're having these thoughts, you know,
Right.
and being able to say that, because what you mentioned, you said that when you don't, like when you're having those thoughts and you feel like you can't say them, you feel guilt and you feel shame, which only heaps so much more onto this whole process that people are already going through. Yeah. So like, how in that anger, you talked about anger specifically and widespread anger. Where do you think that anger comes from? Because Leanne was killed in a car accident. So there's another person that you had to work through with that, and forgiveness and that whole situation of God, what? Yeah.
In fact, when I was writing the book, my editor, she looked at that one chapter and she said, Greg, listen, these are two separate issues. And I said, well, what do you mean? She said, well, it sounds like you're angry at two different entities. You're angry at the driver, but you're also angry at God. So why don't we split those up, and let's talk about being angry at someone, another human. And as believers, how do we wrestle through that? Is that legitimate? We talk about in that chapter the issue of forgiveness. And in my particular case, Allie, the driver that hit Leanne also died at the scene. And so he hit her from behind. It was 100% his fault. So there's a target to be angry at. But when that target, so to speak, is not even alive, now what do you do with that anger? Like who do you put that toward, right? And so I talk about that and how do we wrestle through that? But then there's this whole other entity, this whole other person called God. Mm-hmm. And gosh, God, why did this happen? And I, I'm just being honest, like I'm angry at you, because that light could have turned green. She could have taken a different route home, right? We exercise all these other options as if God's not in control, as if we're saying, you missed this one. Like, I've always believed in your sovereignty. I've always believed in your plan, God, but now I'm questioning it. Right. And it's not until we get into those situations. And so I thought, am I the only one who's ever done that? And what I found is in the Bible, a lot of people actually did that. And it wasn't until I started looking into it from that perspective that I found people like David and Isaiah and Abraham even, and Moses, and all the way through the scriptures, that people looked at their situation and thought, God, is there another way we could do this? And the difference, I think, and what I mention here is that I really do believe, and I'm not like parsing words here, I do believe there's a difference between anger and lamenting. Whereas I think that anger is really is saying to God, I'm angry and I really don't care that you hear that. And I really don't care, God, that there's maybe a solution, or that I'm just angry and you're going to know it. Lamenting is really going to God saying, God, I'm angry, I'm frustrated, I'm suffering, but, you are still God. And God, you know the depth of my pain. You sent your son to the cross. You denied him at his most vulnerable moment. I mean, God, you know. So God, there is a part of me that's trusting in you. For answers, for healing, for to get me through this. And I, David has a number of lament psalms, and I would encourage any reader who's struggling, go to those, just Google lament psalms and read those and understand that you're not alone in this. This has been happening for millennia, but there's a difference between being just angry, I'm just going to lash out and live in that, and saying, God, I'm hurting. Right. I'm angry, but I'm going to trust that you have some answers for me. Right. And interesting, because when you're in the book, you were talking about the main part of anger, that revenge that comes from the core of that, and how you just separated anger towards God, just being like, you know what, I'm mad and I'm out. Yeah.
that's revenge.
Yep.
That's anger. And then the difference between that and lament of being like, I am angry, but it's like painful. I've never really seen those two put together like you did, Greg. And it really was highlighting to me, even in my own journey right now, and then not specifically towards loss, but maybe where I am in my life and journeying through that and being like, God, what? Huh? Like, this is not what I thought this would be like.
Right.
And yet I'm like, I don't want to be angry at God
or
with him. And then, but also the lamenting side of that, it gave me, I feel like, more space to even grieve what I thought could be, what I was hoping would be.
100%.
And being like, I'm upset because this isn't what I wanted, but also I know who you are. I know you're good, and I know you're God, and you're sovereign. And I have to remember that.
Yeah, and it's the tension we live in as believers, that God really desires an authentic relationship with you. He doesn't want to sugarcoat it. And he tells us throughout the scriptures, as believers, you are going to have trials and struggles and tribulations. So we kind of know that going in, but until we experience it, it's cotton candy, it's fluff, and then we experience it, and then we have emotions that are natural emotions. We just don't know what to do with them. You talk about doubt. I had the privilege of doing a TEDx talk on this, and can as a person of faith have doubt? Can we doubt God? And what does that even mean? And I love exploring these because I know I'm not the only one who's dealt with these issues.
Right.
And that's why, again, we want to put more resources out there to say, listen, these may not be the best answers on the planet. They may not, but if we can get the conversation started,
right,
and just trust that we're on a journey. This isn't, let's go to a 2-day conference and figure this out. This is, God, what does your word have to say about this? And I want to submit to that faithfully. And in the same time, God, I'm going through something really, really difficult, really difficult. Not, I stubbed my toe or I tweaked my ankle, but God, I'm broken. Like, I am unquestionably broken. Mm-hmm. And here I am. So how do I do this?
Right.
And how do I do it well? Honestly, I think the outside world, Allie, is looking in because they're experiencing loss and pain and suffering as well. And they're looking into this Christian community saying, you trust in a God, you believe in a God that seemingly has answers, seemingly has peace and is long-suffering himself. Show me how you're going to do this. And so that's why we've broken it up into several different chapters, and because we just want to piecemeal this. Like,
right.
Let's dive into doubt. Let's dive into anger. Let's dive into lamenting and just sit in it for a while. Like you said, it's, okay, God, I'm in it. I'm not going to figure it out all at once. So here it is. I'm going to lay it out in front of you. And let's just trust that God's okay with that. We're not being sacrilege to say to God, man, I'm struggling. Mm-hmm. Several people have done that before us.
Right. And I love this conversation. If you're joining us, this is the Vibrant Life Show. And Greg Tonkinson here, author of Unwanted Fraternity, amongst many other things that he does. And we are diving into what it feels like we have lost people in our lives. We're searching for healing, but what does that look like when we turn that towards God and be like, what? I mean, we're people of faith, most of us that are listening in, and some people aren't, but, and I think people who are not quote unquote people of faith would be like, God, if you're out there, what in the world are you doing?
Yeah.
This makes no sense.
Yeah. In fact, people, use that as a reason not to come to God. They say God would never have allowed that. Mm-hmm. And what I like to have them understand is I'm a person of faith, and God allowed it. In other words, I'm not going to promise you if you come to faith, God isn't going to allow pain and suffering and loss in your life. I am encouraging you that I believe that the Christian worldview has the best answer to that because we're all going to experience it. So how do I deal with it in a healthy way? Because that's the goal. I don't want to live in this forever. I want to so I'm 12 years into my journey. And I love sharing with someone who's 3 weeks into their journey because I've just been a little further down the road. And I feel like there is some healing that has taken place. There are some great moments that have taken place in the past 12 years that I want to readily share that with others. The goal is not to stay in the position I'm in, but it's not to deny the position I'm in either. And I think as Christians, I met someone very early on in my journey. Same thing, lost a spouse, had small children, and I want to say a day or two into his journey, I met him, and it was as if nothing had happened. he had embraced this idea that, well, life happens. You just got to get up and move on. And I just thought, friend, I'm going to pray for you because I think that more is going to come your way because you're in a state of denial I've never seen before. And so I just want to open up this conversation to whomever has experienced this to say, man, I'm here. We have resources out there. And if Unwanted Fraternity can be a small resource in your journey, praise God. But there are so many other resources out there.
Right.
The primary resource is Christ himself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I end each chapter with talking about Jesus and connecting with Jesus.
That's what I really wanted to get to at the end of this one, because we didn't get to touch on the last show. But I love how you ended every chapter connecting with Jesus and how Jesus dealt with each one of those situations and everything. So how did you come to that conclusion to include it? And why do you think that's important?
Oh man, it scared me to death to publish something and think people are going to take my words as gospel. People are going to take my words as, well, Greg said it. How important is it to just drive people to Christ? How important is it that we get out of this and just drive people into the lane which they should be in, which is Jesus is going to walk with you in this. You and I will be there temporarily. We can help in our finite human ways. But you need to understand, not only will Jesus walk with you in this, he's experienced this. And so it was such a delight. Honestly, it was a labor of love to look through the scriptures and to go to God and say, God, show me where Jesus has experienced doubt. Show me where he's experienced suffering. Show me where he's experienced anger and loneliness and beautiful community. And God, like if the reader can get to the end of the chapter and just understand, this is not about Greg's story. This is not about Allie's story. This is about you as a human and prayerfully a believer connecting with your Creator, even in pain. We live this life where we come to church, we come to Bible studies, we come to women's ministry, and we have to put on this front. And Allie, I'm so tired of us trying to put on this front.
Same.
I just want us to come, and when we're feeling good, great. Like, let's rejoice together. Let's not deny that. But man, there's so many times where we're struggling, and can we create spaces where we can admit that? I think the first step is to go to God in our moments when we're alone, in our moments of solitude, and say, God, I need to believe that you've been further down this path than me. What would the Christian life look like if we worshiped a God who we honestly couldn't say has experienced what we've experienced? Yeah. And so that's why I ended each chapter with, please, 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 if you don't do anything else, connect with Jesus.
Right.
You don't have to like the book or like the illustrations or like the journal entries, but man, it would do me well if you said, Greg, the book was okay, but I connected with Jesus. Praise God.
Right. And that's so critical that I think part of us, I think some of us are missing in our conversations within the church, because sometimes we even think like if we do this, this, and this, it equals a great life that God's promised. And you look at the life of Jesus and what? Like how we can create a theology like that in our lives, but we don't actually see that in the life of Jesus. But what it shows us is a God who came down for us and experienced this human experience and understands where we are.
You know, it helped me. I don't know, how off this sounds, but my doubting God, my pain, my anger drove me closer to him, not further away. Because again, in my lament, I was going to the scriptures. I was going to God in deep prayer and saying, God, like, we need to figure this out because I'm dying here. Like I am broken. So God, we need to figure this out. And honestly, like, I'm serious. We're not playing games here. And God, every step of the way said, Greg, I'm here. Like I'm not going anywhere. And I'm going to give you my son as the primary example of someone he's going to become so close to you. And Allie, I'm telling you, and many other fraternity members will acknowledge this as well. Jesus became my best friend because he got me. Because every step of the way, every passage I turned to was one more example where I could look at Jesus and say, my Savior, my King, my Lord, and my God, and someone who gets me.
Right.
So I'm deeply, deeply in love with Jesus, even though it's painful.
There's no one like him.
There isn't.
And this is what separates from every other religion, every other God.
Amen.
And so I just appreciate you just sharing your heart, sharing your wisdom and everything that you've been through. And I know I'm excited for your book to really be in the hands of people in July, but ebooks available now.
Right now, yeah.
Where can people find you, Greg?
Thanks so much, Allie. Yeah, you can go to gregtonkinson.com. You can go to the Valley Christian website, and then you can go to any platform that books are sold.
That's awesome. Thank you for being here today, Greg. And
Loved
remember that every day is an invitation to live the vibrant life. Thank you for joining me on the Vibrant Life Show. I would love to connect with you and get to know you. My favorite place to hang out is over on Instagram at allie.gentry or over on Facebook. You can also go to my website, alliegentry.com. That's ALIGENTRY.com. Sign up for my newsletter to stay up to date and get links to the show on all platforms after we air, the show's YouTube channel, and really just all the things. I am so honored to get to hang out with you today. My heart is that you remember that each day is an invitation to live the vibrant life.